Well, welcome to Brooks River in Katmai National Park, Alaska. My name is Mike FITZ, your resident naturalist with Explore.org, and this is our play-by-play broadcast for October 13, 2021. Glad you're taking part of your day to join myself and my co-host, Ranger Naomi Boak from Katmai National Park. Naomi, how are you today? And I hope you're enjoying the warm weather down in Connecticut because the bears certainly look to be in a chilly environment up at Brooks River.
Well, I think they'd prefer to be in that chilly environment than here in Connecticut where it's in the 70s. I mean, if I weighed that much and had a fur coat on, I'd much prefer to be in that river.
Yeah, they don't seem to be bothered much by it at all. And maybe that's one of the things that we'll talk about during this broadcast. So neither Naomi or I are physically at Brooks River, unfortunately. So we're just we're able to enjoy this experience through the webcams along with you. So we'll be looking at the Brooks Falls camera today. That is our only camera that is live at the moment. We might try to answer some viewer questions that came in advance through our Ask Your Bear Cam question form. You can find a link to that in the featured comment below the live camera feed. So thanks to everyone who submitted their questions in advance. And, of course, we may talk just a little bit, Naomi, about the conditions up on Dumpling Mountain. Actually, we do have two live cameras at our disposal. This is the view from Dumpling Mountain, believe it or not. It is a very cold and foggy landscape up there. So winter is descending quite quickly on the mountains of the Katmai region. And if you're not familiar with Brooks River and its location, let me introduce you to it. So let's take a quick tour here. Brooks River is located about 300 miles southwest of Anchorage, Alaska, in the west central portion of Katmai National Park. The river itself is about 1.5 miles long, so maybe about 3 kilometers, bisected by Brooks Falls. And along with the National Park Service, Explore.org hosts and maintains several webcams at Brooks River. And the signal from those webcams, are sent to radio repeaters on Dumpling Mountain, one of which we were just looking at a view from a moment ago. And then those repeaters hop the signal to the small town of King Salmon, about 30 miles away. So it's a bit challenging to keep the cameras live at this time of the year because cloudy conditions, rainy conditions, and even when you get sunny days, there's not a whole lot of daylight in this part of the world at this time of the year. So it can be a challenge to keep the webcams live, and that's why we have, I think, limited viewing hours at this time of the year. But nevertheless, we're glad to be able to share this experience with you. And Naomi, we've been seeing, since the webcams went live just about a half hour ago, a few different bears moving in and out of the falls area. And it looks like maybe the biggest bear that we have in our view right now is the big guy 115, who's in the jacuzzi right now. We really haven't talked about him on a play-by-play yet.
No, and I haven't seen him much during the year, but he is one large bear, and you look at him, you can oh, there was a salmon jumped. You can almost mistake him for 747. I mean, he has the same kind of shaped nose, and he you know keeps the nose out of the water like 747 does, in the same spot as 747, and he has that big hulking body. So very interesting to see him.
Yeah, and he's a bear that we don't know too much about. He only shows up in the fall. So we only see him in September and October. We don't see him in early summer. And yeah, he does well for himself somewhere else. I mean, he comes back pretty fat and he gets fatter while he's here. Uh, so
I mean,
yeah,
that's another story. It's another story to tell about these bears that we sometimes forget, is that there are other places for them to fish. And there are bears who show up in the fall very fat, very successful, and we haven't seen them at all until then.
the landscape at Brooks River right now is really taking on the look of near winter, I guess is a way to describe it. As our camera operator takes us downstream here, you will see bears fishing downstream of Brooks Falls. I guess to put it more accurately, scavenging for dead and dying salmon. We're past the peak of the salmon spawn in Brooks River, so salmon are a lot of them are done spawning, but spawning activity will continue really until the end of the month. It gets there are fewer salmon uh, as the month continues, but it'll keep bears around. So I think as we get our limited webcam views over the next couple of weeks, we can expect to see bears using Brooks River, but maybe along the lines of fewer salmon that also equates to fewer bears. But definitely one bear downstream right now scavenging for salmon that are have already spawned or are in the midst of dying right now.
So, Mike, you've stayed up there and lived there year round. How fast do we lose light at this time of year?
Oh, it's something like 5 minutes a day, or sometimes maybe a little bit more. So it you really notice it. And when I was working, year round for Katmai, I was stationed in king salmon in the winter, and it wasn't all that great to go to work in the dark with sunrise, coming around 9:30 a.m. or something like that, and then sunset happening like at 4 p.m. And so you go to work in the dark and you come out and it's dark already. So when you have those days off and it was the sun was shining, it was quite nice to be able to enjoy that. But the bears, surprisingly, Naomi, we've been seeing bears fishing at the falls in pitch black. Otis has been doing that. I'm not sure about the bear in the foreground here, and I'm not sure about the identity in that of that bear in the foreground. But Otis, one of those recognizable bears in the background, our Fat Bear Week champ this year, that sort of floppy right ear, um, more of a light brown grizzled fur color on him, lunging for a salmon. And it's for me, it's been actually really surprising to see the bears fishing in the pitch black. I did not expect that to happen at this time of the year because they can see better at night than we can, uh, but I'm not sure how well they can actually see the fish. But they've been doing it.
And Otis has been there nonstop. I mean, we talk a lot about his being old, but he has made so many adjustments to compensate for his age and is such a successful bear, and he works hard at it. I mean, he's actively fishing, he has energy, he's not a quitter.
Not in any sense of the word. He has a work ethic that I think other bears, if they could, if they experienced envy, might feel. And I mean, he demonstrates, of course, success in the bear world. I mentioned how he was the Fat Bear Week champion this year. In the final matchup, he was facing off against 151 Walker, who is no small bear. But I think people resonated, or Otis's story resonated with people this year, coming back to the river quite late for him. So that late July picture shows him to be quite skinny, and then you can see the transformation that he has experienced since that time. And he's even fatter now, Naomi, than when I think that photo of him on the bottom was actually taken. So Otis is doing quite well for himself in a short period of time. Whoops! And I'm also acting as producer as well as color commentator here. So if you're wondering how those mistakes happen, you can blame me for that. But yeah, Otis doing really well for himself.
Yeah, I mean, look how wide his neck and his head are right now compared to even that September 16th photo.
And his ear too doesn't even seem nearly as floppy as it was early in summer. I think that's probably because it's just plumped up. Like his whole body really has plumped up overall. So I know people have been wondering about Otis, and since he's an older bear, if you're not familiar with him, let's just run through some basics about Otis right now. He was first identified in 2001 as an older subadult or younger adult bear, so right around 5 years old at that time. So that places him in his mid 20s. Right about now, he was never like truly one of the most dominant bears at Brooks River, but he was a very large bear for a long time. Often had his choice of fishing spots. I remember him displacing bears right now that we consider to be very large bears like 747 from the jacuzzi. So he had his moment to access his fishing spots almost whenever he wanted to. Now, as an older bear, he's facing different challenges. You know, missing teeth, for example, worn down teeth. He has to wait his turn for fishing spots, and in a lot of on a lot of occasions. But yeah, he's still, I think, a story of success in the bear world. Now we're getting a look at a younger adult male here, but certainly a very large one. Again, that 115 moving towards the camera.
He's really big. I mean, we don't really know a lot of the genetics of these bears, but you look at a bear like that and you think, could he be related to 747? I mean, just the size and some of the similarities and looks, but it's pure conjecture through pixels on my part.
Well, when we for the bears that we know a little bit about their family lineage, like from mother to daughter or mother to son, I think when we see that, if we can watch one of those cubs, for example, growing into an adult, we can see like mom's features on that bear. For example, if you were to look at and these bears aren't on camera right now, of course, and I unfortunately I don't have photos of them to queue up, but like number 83 and number 274, they're suspected to be siblings from the same mother but from different litters. And I think you can see in both of those bears, I think you can see mom's face and ears in both of those bears. So their mother was 438 Flo, introduced those bears to the river as cubs, and now as adult bears, they're successful. They come back to the river. We've been seeing 273, or excuse me, 274 a little bit this fall. We haven't seen 83 in a while. He was around for a bit, but he seems to have departed recently. But look for that. And I think if we could ever, figure out who the fathers of a lot of these bears are, then I think we would see those features from the male line being passed down as well. Unfortunately, Naomi, can you explain why we don't know who the father of these bears are? Or at least we can't without DNA evidence.
Yeah, I mean the males don't stick around to raise the cubs. So we never see the family. We see the sow and cubs, and without genetic analysis, we just won't know. And Dr. Michael Saxon attempted to do that, but and was able to analyze some of the genetics of the bears here by finding out that it is a diverse and healthy population genetically, but we can't get the lineage from his study because those tissue samples that he got in 2018 were lost in the lab, unfortunately. But I think it is, I mean, when we try to ID bears, it's so interesting to look at their different physical characteristics and see commonality in them. And as like you say, where we know the mother or grandmother of certain bears, you can see it. I think in the 435 Holly family, you see that a lot. But we can speculate about fathers, but we really don't know, unfortunately.
And while you were speaking, Naomi, I was looking at what the hive mind says about the bear that's standing closest to the camera right now, because most
Hmm.
often, the hive mind is right,
Hmm.
and they are saying that this is bear number 99, and 99 is also another one of those bears that I haven't had too much of an opportunity um, to get to know. But looking at the bear monitoring notes that I have, this bear was first identified as a 3-year-old subadult in 2019. So this is a bear that's at an age that's really where he is transitioning into adulthood. And a lot of times, we look at some of these bears that aren't as conspicuous as Otis or 747 or or Walker, some of these other really large adult males that utilize the waterfall. We don't tend to pay too much attention to them because they're harder to identify or whatever it happens to be. But um, they're likely to be the big bears in the future that have stories similar to Otis or 747. Um, So, when if we can get to know, I think, some of these younger bears a little bit better, then that'll help enrich our experience at the same time. And these
Yeah.
bears right now aren't having a whole lot of success fishing at Brooks Falls, at least since we've started the broadcast. But Naomi, are they mostly fishing for um, spawned out salmon, or are these bears really looking for more lively fish?
I think they're looking for more lively fish. I mean, watching Otis, I mean, he's actively looking at fish, and before we did see 115 catch a live fish. So there's something in there. Do you agree?
Yeah, I think so. The water at the falls is just so swift that a lot of the salmon that are spawning upstream in the falls, if they're too weak to hold themselves in the current, and they get tossed over the falls by the current, they're just going to be swept downstream really quickly. And if that happens, if they right in front of O's face, for instance, or 99's face, or 820, who is sticking like a wallflower over there against the far wall, fishing on the downstream side of things. Uh, if those dead and dying salmon drift right in front of those bears' faces, then the bears are going to try to grab it. But really, what they're looking for is a fresher salmon, one that hasn't spawned yet or is very close to spawning. So we saw actually last week, Naomi, and it looks like Otis was successful there.
You got one,
Bears
yeah.
actually finding quite a bit of success one day or late last week, where it seemed like maybe there was a run of coho or silver salmon, a small one that moved up the river that day, and we were seeing something like 9 bears at the waterfall. But Otis, again, showing how successful he is as an angler.
Yeah, and really well. Mike, because you've stayed at Brooks late in the season. Um, does Otis usually come to the falls at this time of year, or is he in the lower river more?
He'll use both locations, but within my experience and my observations, it seems like he is a bear that frequently uses the falls at this time of the year. It can depend on the competition and his whether he's finding a lot of success. We'll also see him down though at the mouth of Brooks River as well, and it seems like he tends to do that though pretty early in the morning, at least during the season when people are more active at Brooks River. I'm not sure if there are any staff still at Brooks River. If there are, there might just be a few maintenance employees finishing up some winterizing projects on the facilities there. But it's a quiet time of the year at Brooks River, and Otis really doesn't seem to be too habituated to the presence of people away from the falls. He'll tolerate people on the platform at Brooks Falls, but down at the mouth of the river, it seems like he tends to avoid. See him down there earlier in the morning rather than during the midday hours when people are active, especially in early September.
Yeah, when I was there a month ago, I would see him in the lower river in the morning, um, fishing and doing well, and basically staying down there for a lot of the day. So good to see him up at the falls. And that younger bear, 99, to know that it's that young, that bear is pretty big for its age.
Yeah, looking to be with the potential to, again, to grow into a pretty large adult bear. You can look at the some of these younger adults and say, hey, you know what, that bear probably has a little bit of growing to do just by looking at like its neck size. I mean, the fully grown adult males like Otis, for example, or 115, who we were looking at before, they just have really thick necks at this time of the year, and 99 doesn't have that. So I think that's an indication that he still has some growing to do. And Naomi, we do have another camera at our disposal. Um,
Oh,
and this is the lower river. This just came online thanks to a little bit of sunshine. So it looks like maybe Holly is um,
yeah.
looking to scavenge some salmon, maybe just exiting the water. And I don't see her little mini me nearby, but certainly that bear is close by.
Yeah, and not so many these days. I hope we see it
No.
because it's a tall yearling.
So why don't you fill us in a little bit on Holly's life history here? Holly is one of our more recognizable bears that we have at Brooks River, but she's a mother bear this year, and she has just one cub. What else do we know about her?
Well, Holly is almost the same age as Otis. And she's had several litters. She's got a bunch of offspring living along the Brooks River, and she's really famous as a really wise mother. She most famously adopted bear 503 when it was a yearling and was left by its mother 402 because she probably came into estrus and was being pursued by male bears. And that's a really, really unusual event. And she kept 503 for an additional year. She had a spring cub at the time, who now 719, who has had two cubs of her own. And Holly is just she's a very successful bear. And oh, that doesn't look like her cub. That looks like 132's floofy cubs have joined the scene.
Yeah,
And I think I
those are
see
definitely
Holly's
spring
cub
cubs.
too. Yeah, I think it's Holly's
So
cub I
two,
see in the background.
yeah, so this is a great scene here. So two family groups in the vicinity: spring cubs, first year cubs in the foreground, and then Holly and her yearling in the background. And I think if the yearling comes up into better view, we'll definitely get an idea of the difference in body size just over the course of the year. Those spring cubs aren't small; they're probably 70 pounds or more right now. But Holly's yearling is certainly well over 200 pounds, so growing quite a bit. And it looks like maybe 132 coming up on the spit as well.
And it'd be interesting to see 132's reaction to her cubs being so close to Holly if we don't freeze here. Continue to
Yeah,
get
it's
bigger.
it's possible that our lower river camera just ran out of power. Nope. Oh, there it is. No, maybe we're looping back to the beginning.
Yeah.
Uh, so we'll see. I'll keep monitoring it. In the meantime, we'll see what happens there. Hopefully, we'll be able to get back to
It's
some live views
ground
of the lower river cam.
it's Groundhog Day on the lower river.
And back up to Brooks Falls. Again, this is maybe 3/4 of a mile upstream of the scene that we were just looking at. So the water that you're seeing here is flowing down towards the river mouth. A couple of bears scavenging for salmon downstream. The area that we call the cut bank, Naomi, is a pretty productive place for bears at this time of the year. And also, I like to look at this view too because you see a lot of gulls utilizing this area, and they're looking maybe to scavenge dead salmon like the bears are. But when you see them like diving into the water and rising very quickly, most of the time they're just bobbing for salmon eggs, and they're getting fat on salmon eggs that are drifting downstream.
Do do we normally see a number of ducks around there as well?
Yeah, mergansers will utilize that vicinity. Occasionally, maybe a goldeneye, but it seems like mergansers are more commonly seen in that area. And sometimes people wonder whether like the birds or the trout that are in the river that are also gorging on salmon eggs are helping to reduce like the salmon population itself. And if you're feeding on a salmon egg that's drifting downstream, um, there's no scientific evidence that suggests that that predation decreases the population of the next generation of salmon because those eggs are doomed to die. If they're not buried in a nest, then they're going to experience either freezing temperature or suffocation if they get covered by silt, or they're just going to get bruised, getting tossed around in the current. So those eggs are very, very unlikely to survive drifting downstream in the current. So basically, the birds are just kind of picking off the excess, the eggs that didn't make it into the nest, or maybe got dislodged by a nest or from a nest. Excuse me. And but they're living large. The salmon are important to more than bears, and I think Brooks River provides us with a great example of that.
Yeah, and this is a terrific illustration of how intertwined all the elements of this ecosystem are, how interdependent they are. And you raise the question of whether those salmon eggs would be depleting the salmon in the river, but no, it's they're keeping the river alive. So it's really an amazing story.
And this is, of course, the time of the year where a lot of bears start to disperse um, from from Brooks River, and that I think we did have one of those a question about that. Um, See if I can find it in our list here. When will the bears go into hibernation, and what drives that? Now, I'm going to check back with our lower river cameras, but yeah, do you want to talk just briefly about the bears and their hibernation cycle in the Katmai region?
Sure. Well, they leave for their dens fairly soon, late October, early November. Some of the larger males may stay out a little longer, but their metabolism slowed down. There's less food. It's I think the light may have something to do with it as well, and it's just time to switch gears and go to their dens.
Yeah, at this time of the year, bears are going to be dispersing away from uh, from Brooks River. It's not like a mass exodus. You just don't see the bears disappearing all at once, but they will disappear kind of one at a time, depending on food availability. I think that's a big thing for them. Maybe some of the bears know of a place that is that holds like a very late run of sockeye salmon. Upstream in the Naknek Lake watershed, there's tributaries of the Savanoski River where some salmon will be spawning in November. Uh, but Brooks River doesn't have generally spawning salmon or many spawning salmon in November. The latest I've ever been out to Brooks River has been at the end of October and early November, and the banks of the stream are just lined with fish heads. But looking into the water at that time of the year, I couldn't find any live salmon. So the salmon are pretty much done with their spawning efforts um, at that time of the year.
Have there been surveys along the Savanoski and other rivers later in the season? Surveys of the bears?
No, not formally, as far as I'm aware. I think the little bit that we know about that situation just is anecdotal. During some patrol flights that rangers will have occasionally, they'll just fly over the Savanoski in November and be like, "Hey, look, there's some bears fishing at this tributary stream," but nothing substantial as far as like uh, recorded information.
And Otis remains.
It's amazing how patient he is. We see all the other bears move in and out. 115 left, 99 left. Uh, Looks like 820 is still over there practicing his craft as well. But Otis, again, he is just so patient. It's really kind of amazing how patient he is.
And just watching him fish now, I mean, sometimes he is very still when he fishes. So, do you know what's going on that's making him so actively move? I mean, for Otis, that's pretty active.
Yeah, I don't know. A lot of other bears, they 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 do seem like they get a little more impatient than Otis. Seems like Otis has realized, hey, no matter what, if I stay here, I found this to be a successful fishing location. So if I stay here, maybe maybe I'm taking a chance that no fish will come near me. But based on my past experience, this seems to work out really, really well. So I'm just going to continue along with it. And bears are creatures of habit, even though they have the ability to learn new tricks. But Otis, he really does seem to be that I think that bear that personifies patience and be a bear of a creature of habit. And a great look at him right now in the far pool of Brooks Falls.
You might want to show that skinny picture again.
Yeah, I'll bring that up and let's, we can compare and contrast because yeah, Otis is just looking so good right now.
I know. Look at that.
But he wasn't looking so great at the end of July this year. Uh, Bears, are adapted, of course, to experience extreme weight gain throughout the summer and then extreme weight loss throughout their hibernation period in the winter. There doesn't seem to be evidence that they suffer any ill health effects from that, though. Things like that would harm us. If we're eating a diet like a bear and with an excess amount of calories from our perspective, we would be suffering from things like heart disease. It would make us put us at greater risk for things like diabetes. Bears become insulin resistant kind of around this time of the year, but then that reverses within hibernation. I mean, it's really a fascinating process that they undergo, and it's amazing that they stay healthy during that time.
And also staying healthy with that amount of change in their weight, because that would also, those swings in weight and in fat for us would also make us very ill.
And I did make a little bit of mistake there earlier, Naomi. I went to, I think, the our lower river uh, east camera, which is not supposed to be online at this time of the year, but our lower river west camera actually is live. So this is, if you're watching on explore.org after our broadcast and you want to watch this view, this is the lower river view right now. So an example of just what bears are doing in the lower river at this time of the year, just scavenging for dead and dying salmon, looking for things that can't swim away. And this scene right now is so much different than what we could see on this camera or cameras nearby in July when the landscape is so green. It is, if you see screenshots from this camera earlier in the year, it is just so bright green, and now everything is just spent except for the bears. They're about the only things that aren't spent. They're still working hard trying to get fat.
And that bear's done a pretty good job.
We're also seeing that the water level is dropping pretty quickly. What would you estimate the water level in the lower river has dropped since what you saw at its height in September? Maybe a couple of feet.
Oh, at least. At least, I mean, you see on the pylons that they're, the watermarks, right? And it's at least 2 feet lower along those pylons than it was when I was there in September.
And that's a product of things just getting cold on the landscape itself. Dumpling Mountain, which we saw earlier, covered in snow at this time of the year, so not as much runoff going into the river basins and the lake basins at this time of the year. With the glacial runoff on the high peaks, excuse me, in the Aleutian Mountains. Um, that is much reduced at this time of the year as as things start to freeze up. So we're seeing a lot less water running into the Naknek Lake Basin, and as a consequence, much less water in the lower river area um, at this time of the year.
It's like a bear under the bridge there.
And there could be a lot of bears in this vicinity at this time of the year. Sometimes the views from the webcams can be a little bit deceiving, um, just because we're getting like a limited line of sight. Our camera can pan 360 degrees, but it only can look, its line of sight, even at its widest angle, is somewhat limited. So sometimes they can be a little deceiving and lead us to believe that there are fewer bears using the lower river at this time of the year. But there can be quite a lot still scavenging for fish in this area. And I think we'll come back, of course, to the lower river um, later on in the broadcast. If you joined us a little bit late, thanks for tuning in and spending part of your day with us. My name is Mike FITZ with Explore.org. My co-host for this play-by-play is Ranger Naomi Boak from Katmai National Park. And Naomi, a great look from our camera operators right now of the bear number 820, who we see in July and September, but not a bear that I would consider to be a particularly large adult.
820 is pretty young still, right?
Let me check my notes so I don't get that wrong
Six
off
or
the top of
seven?
my head.
I'm
So
guessing
let's
six or
see
seven.
here. Yeah, number 820 here. He was first identified in 2017. The notes that I have say he was maybe 3 years old when he was identified then. So yeah, he's not a very old bear. So he's in young adulthood as well. One of those bears that, yeah, is easy to kind of overlook. Again, as you're watching, some of the more conspicuous adults at the falls, but on a trajectory, if he sticks around and grows into a large bear to be one of the bigger, more dominant adults at Brooks Falls. It's been hard for me to predict over the years, Naomi, which of these young adults are going to become very dominant adults as they reach full body size and full maturity. There doesn't seem to be a lot of indication in their younger years that they're going to be really really big. I know that was at least my experience with 747. He was just kind of like a goofy young adult male, and he ballooned into this giant one year. So that could happen to bears like 820 or 99 who we were looking at before.
Well, I think about 151 that way as well. I always thought of him as a small bear. He is no longer a small bear. But 820's done very well. Um, he's looking very round.
Yeah, certainly a healthy bear for this time of the year. I haven't seen any bears on the camera that look abnormally skinny for this time of the year. Some of the really fat bears kind of skew our perspective. When you look at a bear like Otis or some of the or 115 or some of the really fat bears that we see at Brooks Falls today, they may give you the impression that like a bear that like the one that is utilizing the lower river right now, that this bear might be, kind of too skinny for this time of the year, but that is certainly not the case. That bear is doing quite well for itself. It's just those really big bears that end up setting the curve.
And as I've been watching the cams in the last week, it really is incredible to see how large the cubs have gotten.
Yes, they are set up for success as well. They look small just because they're near mom at this time of the year, but they're not small animals at all. Again, spring cubs at this time of the year, first year cubs may weigh around 70 pounds or more with some of them, and then the yearlings, certainly all of them are probably well over 200 pounds at this time of the year.
Now, when we're looking at 820, I think of 820 as a kind of social bear, but that may change. And we've seen a lot of that behavior change this year with some of the young adult bears, like 503, who is a lot less tolerant of his playmates than he used to be.
Yes, that's one of the things that I think we can expect to see from a lot of these young adults mature. The fact that they will become less tolerant of other bears, less social in a way. They'll still retain those social adaptations that allow them to communicate things like dominance and their position in the bear hierarchy itself. But we're less likely to see the older bears engaging in something like play versus what we see with younger bears. Bears that we've gotten to know pretty well some of the more conspicuous younger bears, as you mentioned, like 503, or another bear like 812, which has been a young bear this year that's been very conspicuous on the webcams.
And who did very well in Fat Bear Week, by the way.
Yes, he did. To my surprise, actually, I didn't think he would go as far as he
Shows you what
was expected to, but he did. Yeah.
shows you what publicity on the cams will do for you.
And we mentioned earlier, just a little bit of information about bears and going into hibernation, a little bit of what might drive them to go into hibernation. Certainly, food availability is probably the major thing that 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 triggers bears, hey, to for their bodies at least, to tell their bodies, hey, there's not a lot of food around. It's time to cut your losses and go hibernate. And certainly, weather also has an influence. There's evidence that shows that in colder years, like if winter temperatures come about sooner in the fall, that bears will go into their dens sooner. But I think this is a good opportunity, Naomi, maybe to talk about where bears specifically den in Katmai. So, do you want to talk just a little bit about denning habitat in Katmai National Park, and what little we know about where these specific bears are denning?
Yeah, I mean, there haven't been studies in a long time about specifically where they den. We do know that some of the bears den on Dumpling Mountain, and we do have the dumpling cam. And I assume that's a den that you have found on Dumpling?
Yes, this is a den that I found on Dumpling Mountain. Of course, not from this time of the year. This is a springtime photo, a June photo to be a bit more specific. So, but this is a little bit higher than average for bear dens in Katmai. Most bear dens probably uh, are lower in elevation in places where there's more vegetation to help stabilize the den structure. But even the inside of this den had quite a bit of roots sticking down into it. So it was bare on the bottom of it, but it had a lot of roots to help stabilize the den entrance. And then this location itself also was in a spot that collected a lot of snow, so it was probably pretty well insulated from the environment, the
I mean that
outside environment, that is.
Yeah, I mean those pictures are a good illustration of why the bears are not denning right near the river, because that ground is a lot less stable. You won't find roots like that along the river. There's some big holes along the walkway to the falls, and we're always asked, are those bears dens? But they're big holes that subadults have made, but they don't have that structure in them that would hold up, and also the snow that would stay and cover it. So, but bears have a pretty good range. And you have a map from a study that was done in the 70s about the range of the Katmai bears dens.
Yeah, we can take a look at that and see, just to give people a basic idea of where we've known bears from Brooks River to den in the past. Most of the X's on this map here are from from two sources, from locations, radio collar locations done from some Brooks River bears in the 1970s, and then also some of my personal observations. So a couple of X's up on Dumpling Mountain, just north of Brooks River, where I found some dens. Um, I found some dens also on Mount Katolanat, and then there's also been bears tracked from Brooks River in those studies from the 1970s to Mount Calez, which is kind of below the arrow at Brooks River, Mount Katolanat, and then also up the Savanoski drainage, which is that kind of like that horizontal squiggly line that is going right through the center of this satellite image. And some bears from that study in the 1970s traveled as far as 40 miles from Brooks River to a presumed denning site. I wish we knew a little bit more about where the bears were denning, the current crop at least of the bears at Brooks River, but we have a pretty good idea about the habitat that they'll go to. So like we were talking about before, steep, well-vegetated slopes. This is also on Dumpling Mountain. Those two holes right in the center of the image are bear dens from a prior year. So this is also an early spring photo. This is before green up. But yeah, this is pretty typical habitat. Low shrubs, alder thickets, grassy meadows, steep slopes in particular. Those are the type of places that bears do really prefer to den in, at least in Katmai. Uh, Sometimes though, Naomi, they don't really dig a deep hole into the ground. To give people another sense of scale on what a bear den can look like. This is me at the entrance of a bear den on Dumpling Mountain from several years ago. So the entrances can be quite big, but sometimes bears have been observed in other habitats, and I don't doubt that this happens in Katmai because there's been some information about it in some bear den surveys from the past, where uh, bears are just going to sort of not excavate like an actual den in the hillside, but what they'll do is they'll just sort of like dig a flat spot on the side of a hill and just kind of lay down in it and let the snow cover them up. So
Hmm.
a lot of times bears don't even need to dig a hole into the ground. I know people have been wondering about Otis this year. We've been getting a lot of questions about whether Otis, who we've talked about earlier in the broadcast, is going to be able to, um, you know, go to his denning site and find a good den or dig a den. And I think he'll fare quite well this winter. But if worse came to worse, for instance, and he didn't have like the physical strength to dig a den, which I think he has, I certainly do think he has. But if worse came to worse and he didn't, he could probably just find a flat spot and sleep as the snow envelops him. Bears have been known to do that, so that's not an uncommon behavior for bears across North America.
Ah, the use of backpacks rock. Bears love that rock, kind of sit on in the fall in particular.
They do really seem to love that rock at this time of the year. Well, it's not just not one bear that will sit on it. So we're back looking at our Brooks Falls camera, and this is one of many bears that will place its butt just a little bit out of the water there. Maybe it's just a little more comfortable. I kind of wonder if maybe if the water is getting kind of cold, and they're like, well, it is pretty cold, so maybe if I sit on this rock, I'll just be a little bit warmer. They do lose a lot of heat through the pads of their paws, but they are well adapted to just being wet all the time. Even though they're out of the water, it's not like this bear isn't its fur isn't probably soaked right now.
I mean, you often see cubs who are not so used to being in the water pick up their paws a lot. Their paws seem to get cold first. But that rock at this time of year, I've talked a lot about Bear 89 Backpack, who likes that rock a lot and hasn't been back in the fall for a number of years, but he came back this year and he's been frequenting that rock, sharing it with other bears like this one.
So if you watch the webcams, later today or tomorrow, and you see a bear on the rock, don't expect it to be the same one. Could be multiple bears that you'll see in this location. We might catch it if we go down River Naomi right now. We'll catch a glimpse of a bear before it passes under the bridge and out of our line of sight. A bear practicing a typical fishing technique at this time of the year, what we call snorkeling, frequently sticking its face in the water looking for anything that can't swim away.
And water level really has gone down. I mean, a few weeks ago, that bear would be completely underwater there.
And hopefully we'll get some limited views of the not only the lower river um, this year, but also the um, the falls as well. So we'll be able to see some of those seasonal changes. But if we don't, and if the cams come back on, next spring, don't be surprised to see a much lower water level in Brooks River and also at the river mouth, like what we're seeing right now. Because as throughout the wintertime, there's just going to be less and less water flowing into the lake basin itself, unless something really, really weird happens and the area doesn't experience uh, uh, subfreezing temperatures for long periods of time, which is atypical. But winters are getting warmer in the Katmai region due to climate change. So this area is certainly feeling the impacts of climate change. But thankfully, the Katmai landscape is large and undeveloped. There's a lot of habitat for bears. The watersheds are unengineered by people, so salmon still have access to clean, unaltered watersheds. So that makes this landscape more resilient in the face of climate change compared to a lot of other landscapes and habitats and even other national parks, especially in the contiguous 48 states.
And there have been other areas in Alaska where the salmon runs have not been very good. I mean, Bristol Bay had record-breaking salmon run this year, and of course, Naknek and Brooks River are part of the Bristol Bay watershed, and we've gotten a lot of salmon, but not every place in Alaska is doing that way.
Yeah, so that's just a scene from earlier in the year of salmon jumping the falls. So we're not seeing a whole lot of that right now, but hundreds of thousands of sockeye salmon can move through Brooks River at this time of the year. So, or excuse me, in earlier in the year, and then many thousands of those, tens of thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of them, will spawn in Brooks River.
And it's interesting to me, we're looking through these bare trees right now, right? Views that are when I was last there blocked by leaves.
It's amazing how quickly things change in this region, and I'm even noticing it in my neck of the woods in northern Maine. I love the seasonality of things that we find in temperate habitats. I've never lived in a place where you have consistent levels of daylight year round, like you do have in the tropics, and more, of course, latitudes closer to the equator. But at Katmai, it seems like fall lasts, a couple of weeks, and then all of a sudden, it's kind of like winter. And we're right at that stage right now where all the leaves are off of the trees. It's cloudy a lot. There's not a lot of daylight, um, and the bears are quite fat. And the salmon are becoming less abundant, and winter is just right around the corner. It seems like it can show up almost any moment.
I think that rock also provides a good view of the water below.
I don't doubt that. When if anyone's ever gone swimming and you put your eyes just like a foot or so above the water or right at the water's surface, it's really hard to see into the water the closer you are to the water's surface because of the glare that reflects off of the water. But if you're in a higher position, it's much easier just to see straight down into the water itself. So sometimes I think bears might like to stand on a higher perch because it'll give them maybe a little bit of an easier time looking into the water itself. And we'll sometimes see bears charging off of that rock into the water towards an unsuspecting salmon. I mean, we just have a few minutes left in our broadcast here, and we still have, it looks like, Otis and 820 uh, on the far side of Brooks Falls here. But one of the other questions that we had submitted to us in advance is somebody was wondering if bears groom themselves like other animals, and I don't know if you've ever seen that, but I really have not seen bears, grooming themselves, even if they're wounded, like you would see like a cat or a dog do. And they don't necessarily have the flexibility to lick their wounds on their hindquarters, for instance, or reach that areas like a dog does or like a cat does. But even if they have like a wound on their forearms or shoulders, it just doesn't seem like they ever really do that. I don't know if you've ever seen bears utilize any grooming behavior, but I certainly haven't.
No, I haven't either. They'll scratch, but I haven't seen any grooming. I
Otis
just
doing a really great job.
he makes me giggle because he's just so tenacious and consistent.
Yeah, day after day, after hour. I think when we had the webcams live back in August across the whole entire night, uh, it seemed like there was one day I think where Otis stayed in the water for something like for maybe more than 30 hours. I can't remember the exact number, but it seemed like he was in the water that whole entire time. And of course, he wasn't actively fishing that whole entire time. He probably had been taking frequent naps, especially during the nighttime hours, I think. But it goes to show just how comfortable these large brown bears can be in the water. And yeah, and tenacity is one of those other, I think, characteristics that we see in a bear like Otis. It's just not only that he's patient, that he is patient and he has a lot of skill, but he's tenacious. He knows what he needs to do, and he's going to keep doing it until it doesn't pay off for him.
I also it amazes me how well bears can judge their strengths and weaknesses. How they, when injured, will pull back, but when they're in good shape, they'll forge forward.
They're certainly adaptable animals, and that's one of the things that I find fascinating about them. They make decisions. They're mindful animals, so they adjust to new situations depending on the behavior of other bears, their hunger level, competition that they face for their preferred fishing spots. And that's one of the things that we have the opportunity to watch on Bear Cam. And I think that makes this wildlife watching experience quite special. We just have a couple minutes, left in the broadcast, though, Naomi. Wondering if you have any final thoughts for us about what people might be able to or expect to see over the next month here at Brooks River.
Well, I mean, you'll hopefully see continued bear activity, fewer and fewer bears. Um, I'm assuming that the family groups are going to move off pretty soon to find denning sites, and the bears are continuing to get fat and see winter really come to the Brooks River, which is quite a marvel too.
And it's been a great summer working with you. I do want to let everyone know that this is your perhaps your last play-by-play because your season with Katmai National Park ends at the end of the week. So Naomi, like many national park rangers, most of the national park rangers that you see working in parks is only employed seasonally. So she's off to a different adventure, whether that happens to be employment or not, I'm not sure. We don't need to get into the specifics, Naomi. But I do want to thank you for all your hard work this year. It's been a pleasure working with you.
Same here. It's a real treat working with you and my fellow rangers. Um, it's a it's a very special experience that for which I'm grateful every day. And in my immediate future are a bunch of hikes with my dog.
Well, that sounds pretty great. I hope you're able to enjoy some of the fine fall weather in your neck of the woods. And it looks like one last bear on our camera for our play-by-play today. This is maybe number 719, if I can see through the pixels on my screen well enough. Um, a young adult female that has had and weaned one litter on her own. She is a candidate to come back with cubs next year. We'll see if that happens. Thanks for joining us for this play-by-play broadcast today. My name is Mike FITZ with explore.org. My co-host has been Ranger Naomi Boak with Katmai National Park. We do have some more Bear Cam live events in store over the coming weeks, so check out the featured comment below the live camera feed for updates on that. But I'm glad you spent some time with us today. And until we talk again, enjoy the Bears here at Brooks River. Have a great night.
Mike, I'm a huge Bear fan, and having you explain things is such a special thing. What made this Bear season so unique to you? What was so special about it? Mike, I'm a huge Bear fan, and having you explain things is such a special. Mike, I'm a huge Bear fan, and having you explain things is such a special thing. What made this Bear season so unique to you? What was so special about it?
I would
Mike, I'm a huge Bear fan, and having you explain things is such a special thing. What made this Bear season so unique to you? What was so special about it?
I was I this year there were many things. It's kind of hard to choose, honestly. But this year, with the exceptional amount of salmon that returned to Brooks River, I think that really changed the dynamic